And welcome to the first iteration, at least our version of the Baseball Development Hub. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am joined, finally, again, back like we never left, with co-host Dan Galati. Dan, before we get into the podcast episode, first off, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Feels weird to be back on this platform. Been doing everything live for the last however many months. So to be back on a recorded platform feels a little bit weird. I'm out of practice. I apologize to you and listeners.
You're going to do great, and I think the live content, great opportunity to plug our stuff that we've been doing in person, sit down interviews, facility tours, player development driven content as always. So make sure to head over to the YouTube channel to see those videos in full form, or the Baseball Development Hub podcast platform for our sit down interviews. Which brings me to the next topic, Dan, which is the Baseball Development Hub podcast and our vision for this. If you're listening to this right now, you've probably heard our voices. We've talked about everything from interviews to college baseball to MLB baseball, if you even go way back. But the intention of what we want to do with the Baseball Development Hub podcast is have a one platform for all things baseball, player development driven content, perspective conversations. One of the things that Dan and I are lucky enough to do, first off, is to travel the country and talk to really cool baseball people and baseball minds. But we always end up in a car for 6 to 8 hours, end up in an airport for a couple hours before a flight, sitting on a flight together. And we always get into these long winded conversations about baseball. Usually, because of our background and our experiences, it's usually player development perspective of why the Phillies need to do X, Y, and Z, or the hiccups and the problems with youth baseball and baseball development overall. So we wanted to create one platform for us to kind of take those thoughts and talk about everything from modern pitching development, which we have a good perspective because of the people we know and talk to youth baseball and baseball IQ and why guys aren't playing and succeeding right away and understanding the game when they get on college campuses. So we're really excited to introduce this. It's going to be a weekly thing that's going to overlap with our podcast interviews that we do on these campuses. But I think it's going to be a really good opportunity to have a ton of different conversations about the realities of baseball in today's environment.
Yeah, I think you just talked us up a little bit about how we always get into these conversations. I think we always get into these conversations because from a young age, we put ourselves in boxes and neither one of us know anything other than baseball, unfortunately. I think we've learned that in our personal lives, like as we've tried to go out and be members of society we got nothing to offer other than baseball thoughts and sports thoughts. So might as well give ourselves an outlet. It's pretty funny to look back and think about, like you mentioned, like, yeah, we've sat down on a recorded platform now for, I feel like it's been 5 years and we've talked about all kinds of different things. But yeah, no, I do think those conversations are fun to have because I don't know if there's right answer, wrong answer, but there's just our opinion and we have lots of opinions because that's just the type of people we are about it. And like you said, I like to think they're informed opinions because we get to travel the country and talk to so many people who are still in the business and are doing it at an extremely high level, whether it's Kevin Vance, Matt Hobbs, Steve Sabins, Mike Gambino, like whoever we've gone and gotten a chance to talk to. Tommy Cockhill still hasn't been on the show somehow. Maybe we'll get him on here one day. But I think we do have a little bit of like informed opinions. At least we're not just up here as guys who used to be in it, and we're talking about things from when we were coaching or even playing, which is now ancient history at this point.
Yeah, I think that one of the things to preface with the conversations we have is more times than not, we usually workshop these conversations with the coaches we're around. Hey, what, like, we sit down and a lot of times off record, we have these conversations about, hey, what do you think's wrong with youth baseball? And sometimes the conversation on record does end up steering into that conversation a little bit, but we obviously don't get the full unfiltered perspective rather than when the microphone's not on and the camera's not on. Those guys give you exactly their opinions, and not that we're going to sit here and quote and blackmail these people that we really respect in the industry, but we want to, at least that's how we formulated our opinions from our experiences, not only coaching and playing, but also having these opportunities to travel and interact with these people. And I think one of the things I also want to emphasize from this platform, again, this is something that we're hoping to do with some form of frequency, is we want to bring on people with different perspectives and maybe how they do things and get their opinion on maybe, hey, we might be down on the recruiting industry and the high school recruiting landscape, or something that we could dive into in a future episode. And maybe somebody else who's neck deep in it and not unemotional about it and actually working with athletes and communicating with coaches might be like, hey, no, it's not as bleak as you guys think. Yes, the landscape is changing, but there's still opportunities for guys. So as we continue to build this out, it is going to be an interview platform as well, whether it's remote or whether it's in person as we go to these places. But it's going to be a wide ranging of topics, and it's going to, something I'm really excited to, because when we talk about what we want to build in our media company and what we're trying to do, it's player development driven baseball content. And this is probably the platform that we could consider almost therapy for the two of us as we just let our brains wind up and start to spew out our thoughts about just baseball.
Yeah, I think the key too is like to not hold back necessarily, like you said, not call anybody out, but to just, give the opinion, right or wrong, like you said, or whether it's popular or unpopular, and then just kind of roll with it and try and be as natural as possible during it and see where it goes. But I'm excited to do it. Like you said, we have these conversations all the time. My only concern is we have a lot of travel coming up, and like, what the heck do we talk about if we do it on here every week? Could run into some trouble. Might be some awkward silences in the car.
Yeah, my favorite one's going to be when we turn that GoPro around one of these days and just start recording when we're talking. And that's what we post on YouTube or on the podcast platforms. But again, we'll worry about that when we're pounding the pavement, hitting the road, because we have a ton of exciting things coming up. And so make sure, if you're this far in and you're really intrigued about what we're doing, make sure you smash that subscribe button, follow on all social media channels, and make sure you're sticking around so you don't miss any of the great content we have. So, Dan, to get into our topic today, and obviously anybody who's seen the thumbnail or the title and has clicked on this podcast, they're going to understand kind of what we're talking about. I want to lead into it with this. One of the biggest conversation points that we have with so many college coaches, and again, talked to a college coach on the phone today who was traveling out to showcase baseball, is the game just isn't as clean as it used to be. And I use clean intentionally because I do think players are more talented than they've ever been. But I think the focus of baseball, right? The game itself, how to execute what you need to do, how to find barrels, how to throw strikes, how to land a breaking ball, how to control the run game, how to play defense, how to run a double cut. All of these things that are important factors in succeeding at a high level of the game, right? High level high school, high level college, and even professionally, seems to go out the wayside. And it's one of the conversations that I think frustrates college coaches the most, is when they're trying to evaluate players, they don't really get to know everything except for how fast they run, how hard they throw, and how far they can hit the ball, right? It's the tools. And we are in a tools era of college recruiting. So they're okay with that because they're going to train the skills at that point. But the game just isn't as clean as it used to be. So when you look at what the realities of youth baseball, I don't think this is just a high school showcase travel conversation. I think this starts in the grassroots of youth baseball. Where do you see the things that probably need to start improving the most to ensure that we're cleaning up the game? And as talent continues to get better, we also are seeing guys with higher baseball IQs and abilities to just execute the little things on the field on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's like a really tangled web of a problem, and you could take it in several different directions to answer the question. But for me, a lot of it comes down to, like, and I know you agree with me in this, is like player development is extremely important and making people better. And the tools that and resources that we now have across the sport and the industry, right? Because when it first started, like, a lot of these player development tools were at the big league level only, and then they started getting into the college game, and everyone in college, right, it still kind of is almost an arms race of things getting bigger and better. But there was a time when the arms race was, a rapsodo or track band, and then it just kept building to now, like, the arms race is like a whole facility that has, newt force and every other piece of equipment you can imagine in there. And then all those things have continued to seep down into youth baseball, the high school level training, all these specialized training facilities that kids are going to from, shoot, as young as 9 years old, and training year round. Well, all of those things can be important and are good, especially when you get older into a more refined athlete and you've made it to the college and, of course, the professional levels. Those things are important. And if you ignore them or try to ignore them or act like they're not important, I think you're extremely wrong. My only concern and what we've started to see at younger levels and at the college level as well is, like, why can't we train both? Why haven't we learned to allocate our times both? And I just think, like everything, we go way too far to one side and we kind of lose sight of what the actual direction should be. Because at the end of the day, you're still playing the game of baseball, right? At the end of the day, we've gotten so, to me, invested in the 1v1 showdown of pitcher versus hitter that we've let some of the rest of the game slide. Whereas we don't play as good of defense and we don't know how to base run as well. And guys on the mound are max effort and trying to get their best pitch off in every scenario and maybe not understanding how to work counts. And guys at the plate are trying to get their A swing off every single time. And we're trying to fit all these guys into almost chasing numbers. And it's become more of a live pitcher versus hitter showdown than it is playing the game. And I think that's great in certain situations in certain areas, and those things are important to train. But I think we should be able to find a way to be able to not only develop those things and chase some of those numbers, but also be able to play the game at the same time. And that may take a lot more work, and it's hard to manage your time because player development does, you know, take a lot of work and effort and coaching power. But I think that you can't forget the other aspects of the game and ignore them because then, like you said, it's not as clean as it could be or should be for as talented as everybody is nowadays.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because you mentioned the arms race at the top, and again, the only reason we're able to do what we do is because of the arms race at the college level, the facilities we're able to highlight, the player development conversations we're able to have. So we're not going to sit here and poo-poo the importance of them, but I think that's where it is important. One, because that's where the experts in our field are, right? They're in professional in the college game. They understand the technology. They understand how to use it. They understand how to translate that message to an 18-year-old kid. The main thing that we see is should an athlete chase being bigger, faster, stronger, and then let the college coach teach them how to play the game? Or should an athlete teach and learn how to play the game first and allow the college coach or the higher level coach teach them how to be bigger, faster, stronger? The reason I lean the latter is because every kid ends up making those developmental strides the most when they reach that 18-year-old level and they start to take their nutrition and sleep and weight room really serious. Not just like, oh, I'm heading over to my local facility serious, like really taking that as a lifestyle. That's when those guys make those huge strides and gains. And those are the guys that have the most success in college baseball immediately and then really through their careers. Those guys that at the surface level, they understand how to play the game, right? They do the little things well. They put barrel to baseball a lot of times, and then they get into the weight room and they get to these facilities and having the player amenities that college programs have and taking their career to the next level, and even professionally in some cases. Then you start to see 20 pounds of muscle added. That's when you see 5 to 7 miles per hour gain. That's when you see more break on your breaking ball. That's when you see more distance on your BP flyouts that you were hitting in high school compared to what you're doing now that end up traveling into the trees over the fence. And all of those strides that they end up making. And then the other thing, which is a huge conversation point that we don't necessarily have to get into, is seeing that 5 to 7 mile per hour gain at 18 years old naturally from weight gains and then getting into a facility like a West Virginia or any of these programs that develop pitchers really well, getting on their Newt Force mound, getting on their Kinetrack system, getting on their TrackMan, starting to understand how you're moving, the ability to put force into the ground, the ability to prescribe medicine ball, water bag, bands, all these things from an expert standpoint, having all the resources necessary. Talk about the health of the arm. That's a natural progression to 95, 96, 97. When we see these 180-pound wiry kids throwing 95, 96, 97, the ligament can only withstand so much without the foundation that's required to have that. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say you're going to get recruited to West Virginia at 82 because you're not. They need guys that throw harder than that. But understanding that there is a balance, as you said, to developing as a well-rounded baseball player first, getting yourself out of that facility environment where it is that one-on-one, right? Like you said, you painted that picture. We could go to any local facility and put guys in cage matches, and that's basically what baseball is nowadays, right? Like we don't have guys that understand dirt ball reads or understand how to throw split runners, right? Like foreign concept to a high school kid because we're not practicing it enough. But I really think when we look at that to my main point is like seeing that late development. Those are the guys that thrive, stay healthy, and see the best version of themselves playing college baseball and professionally, as seeing those big developmental strides happening under the watchful eyes of these multi-million dollar facilities that these schools are investing in.
Yeah, and I think kind of the way to sum that up is like the evolution of an athlete, right? To me, it's all about like the evolution of an athlete and their career. It's specifically in baseball, obviously. And it's to me the evolution that I would think makes the most sense. And I could be completely wrong on this. I'll be interested what you think, but it's like when you first start playing the sport, it's about running around and learning the movements and just learning obviously the very basic fundamentals, not anything crazy, learning how to catch and throw, learning how to swing, learning how to hold a bat, right? And then just once you get those like three basic things down, you're in T-ball, you're in like the early stages of coach pitch, you just run around and have fun and let your energy out. You're a kid. And as you progress through that, right, into little league where you're pitching to each other and you're learning how to pitch into high school baseball, or middle school and then in high school baseball, like then you can start to pick up some more of these modalities and some more of these, specific, to baseball development techniques and development practices that allow you to then grow into what you're talking about. And as you said, I think you said it best there. It's like then when you get into college, right? Like hopefully we've had enough practice and we've played enough of the game to now where you're in college, and it does become, if you're at one of these programs that we frequently visit, it's like that's your full-time job, right? You think of some of the places we've been and they've talked us through everything they do for their players. Like it's a full-time job. So then it is important to be able to do both. But again, at that level, when you have finally reached that point, and especially when you're a professional and it literally is your job and how you're putting food on the table, you have the time to then continue to sharpen both. But when you're at the high school level and younger into and even younger into youth baseball, one, like you said, you don't have the best coaches at those levels. Those guys are in college, those guys are in the professional ranks, hopefully. And so it's tough when you're younger to be able to have both the individual training, the chasing of the numbers, the learning how to weight lift and throw hard and swing hard, and learn how to play the game the right way, right? And we talking off camera, like how did we learn so much about the game? Well, we watched it. Well, okay, kids aren't watching it as much anymore, and I'm not going to sit there and tell you that you have to, because look, not everybody wants to sit there and watch baseball, watch every single MLB game that they get access to. I understand that. That's fine. That's not the generation of kid now. They want things in shorter bursts. They want to be doing, they shouldn't have to, right? We don't have to go back to that where it's just sitting there as a kid watching every MLB game as you grow up and that's how you learn to play. We have to be able to teach them these things and work on these things before we get into the specialized stuff. And unfortunately to me, I think some of the problem is a money problem, just like everything else in our society, right? Is we have now, started a revenue generating market in our society when it comes to baseball and player development, that if I'm a parent, I am going to spend the money for what people tell me is going to make my child better and better and
Mm-hmm.
get the opportunities of a college education. And if you want to throw an even bigger wrench into this that takes us away from baseball, is like because college tuition is so expensive nowadays that a scholarship is really freaking important, right? Like we we go to these places and we'll often look at what's tuition here. We're curious, and every time I'm like still like I've been out of school for 8 years now, and it kind of blows my mind how much it's changed in those 8 years. So I think the evolution of the athlete and what's the proper evolution for a baseball player who wants to make Major League Baseball, I think, everyone has a different opinion on it, but I think we've got it a little bit backwards where maybe we're starting too young at specializing them and exposing them to some of these techniques that necessarily don't benefit them right now, whereas learning how to play the game and practicing the game and practicing like things like you said, like throwing to the right bases, knowing where to be on, and that is how you become a good baseball player. And then the icing on the cake is then the specialized development techniques that we can use as we advance levels.
And to just kind of hammer home even deeper of the point you made there, especially when it comes to money, is we have youth velocity training classes, 9 to 12 years old, velocity training classes. And again, Parents who are uneducated and want what's best for their kid, and they hear the importance of velocity because it does directly translate to success, see that and they just want what's best for their kid. So then they put them in a situation where they're giving them the opportunity. Whereas that 9-year old kid, because he's prepubescent and he's not even a physically developed human, would be better off watching every Braves game at home and probably learning more about the game, and then getting in the gym with dad at Planet Fitness and moving some weight, getting some squats in and doing some things like that. And then join the 15 to 17-year-old velocity development class when he's a physically developed human being, right? So it's even in that section of baseball right now is we now are prescribing bat speed training to youth. It's not situational baseball. It's not anything like that. It's velocity development, bat speed training for 9 to 12 years old. And that's normal. Like, we're not even like, if somebody's listening to this and goes, that's crazy to think about, like, that's everywhere. We're not singling out any entity that's doing this. That's every facility that you go to is prescribing these, modalities for these athletes, when in reality they would be better off just watching the game. And one of the cool things about our trip to West Virginia was how Coach Saban's talked about how much they watch film. And ironically, that was part of the conversation we had on the car ride up. Was Drew Lars not sitting there slinging footballs for 17 hours a day and trying to see how far he can throw the rock. He's watching defenses. He's seeing how they attack him and things like that. This is the biggest adjustment that youth baseball needs to make, right? Everybody's mom takes videos of their swing, right? And how many kids watch that video and see what was that? What's the count here? What's the situation? What's the pitcher throwing? What's the defense? Where are they playing me? What should I be thinking to do? They all watch their swing and they send it to their local hitting coach, who then watches their swing. Kids can, like, you don't have to sit down and watch a full game, right? That is a dying breed. You don't have to sit there and take the box score from the whole game, right? You can sit there, and even if mom and dad are taking video of you on the mound or of you at the plate, start to switch that mindset to start, instead of looking at your mechanics and how your arm swing is or how your swing looks in that certain frame, start to talk yourself through the situation. What was I looking for? Did the pitcher throw? Why did he throw that? What was his good stuff? And start to challenge yourself. And you're basically doing exactly what you and I did growing up, watching the game, right? What would I throw here? What would I be looking for? Would I bunt here? Would I run here? Oh, I'd be backing up this base. And you're now doing it in snippets that are you, first off, because that's more intriguing and you're able to dial in a little bit better. And you don't have to sit down for 2.5 hours and watch a game. You can just do that with the film that your parents are getting out at every game. So I think that's primary number one, is to start to change these kids' interpretation of not everything is mechanical. Not everything is a physical adjustment you need to make. The game is 90% mental, and we need to start taking our video that mom and dad get and start to evaluate it from a mental standpoint, talk ourselves through the situation and learn from our own film that we're able to get.
Yeah, I think that I couldn't agree more with everything you said there, because I also think that the more you watch yourself, the more you'll pick up even little things outside of that, right? Like, you will pick up mechanical things almost on accident, even if you're not
Yes.
analyzing it. Just because if you start to have this catalog of being able to watch yourself, one, like you said, you're going to be more engaged because it is yourself, but you're also going to start to see things and maybe see differences and remember how you felt on this day compared to this day. And then when you can see it, it's a lot easier to kind of memory bank those things, and then connecting what you're seeing and what you're feeling, right? Because that's so important too, is like, I, okay, I know I need to do this, but sometimes when you're doing the action, you think you're moving a certain way, you think you're doing a certain thing, and then when you watch it back, it's completely different than what you're seeing. And so being able to remove yourself from the moment, from the situation, from the emotions, from what the competition standpoint, the heightened sense of adrenaline, all of it that comes with when you're, you know, actively physically doing it, to then watch it back and see, oh, I thought I was doing this, but I'm really not. So you can even then start to pick up little things like that. But like you said, just from the baseball side, starting to understand, start to develop approach, what works for you, what doesn't. Because also, to me, at the youth level, you know, hopefully you're playing for a good organization where your playing time isn't dependent necessarily all the time on like your statistics as you get to the college game and even the high school game, where like sometimes it's like, yeah, if you're not hitting and you have to perform, then you're not going to get the opportunities. Hopefully you're somewhere where you're getting the opportunities no matter what you're doing, because we're trying to teach you how to play the game and have fun playing the game. that you can start to try and experiment different things in those situations, right? You and I had a good conversation. I actually was just telling some friends about this yesterday, about how you talked about how all the time in college you would sit first pitch breaker and you'd get it. You could never keep it fair because you would get so excited, right? But just the fact that you would be right trying something there, right? Like it's trying an approach. Well, the youth level, it's perfect to do that. Sit on different pitches and different counts, experience different things, find out how to run the bases by trying to go first to third on certain balls. And then by the
Yes.
time you start to get good and you start to learn these things, if you've started to build this up because you've tried different things and you've learned what type of player you are as you start to develop more as an athlete, you're going to understand yourself better. And like you said, the game is 90% mental. So if you're able to do those things, you're going to be ahead of everyone else as you get to the high school level, as you get to the college level, because it's like you see a ball in a certain hit in a certain spot, you know that you can go first to third, or you
Mm-hmm.
know how to get a steal jump, little things like that, which then starts to separate you and you will get the opportunities that you're looking for.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, from our perspective, you can take it from us as former coaches, you can take it from head coaches that we've interviewed. What's the one thing that every college coach needs to have faith in before they put a guy on the field? Just trust that they're going to do the little things well, right? Like those little things, like every head coach I've ever been around, there's nothing they fawn over more than a freshman that knows what they're doing, that can run the bases, that throws to the right base.
Absolutely.
Just like they love that. And it's so funny because we recruit, and this is everybody. This is the industry. This is the metrics based where we're ranking kids. This is the college coaches, right? For recruiting based on size, skill, and how big and strong you are. But it's so funny how it does a complete 360 when kids get on campus and it's like, no, 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 no. I like the kid that can do that, right? Like I like that kid better because he can, he knows we stick him out there for 27 outs in the first day of fall and he knows what he's doing. He gets it. He's been in a good program. And so whether that's high school or college, there's always that level where you start to check those necessary boxes in terms of what coaches want to see and you play more and then you learn more. And you mentioned base running there. To me, base running is such a fascinating example because it's all instinctual, right? The ability to go first and third. And one of the beautiful things about practicing that we've changed at the college level, and it really needs to get into the youth level a little bit more. I think some high school programs do a good job, is just practicing and allowing guys to fail. Right. Coach Saban's, again, I hate to keep referencing it, but it's fresh in my brain because we were just there and I just listened to it again is talking about allowing his guys to play free and make mistakes and play aggressive and play that kind of baseball that they want to be and allowing them then to correct it. You want to know the best way to know whether you can go first to third? Go do it. Practice, push the edges of what you're comfortable doing. Push it. Don't play passive and do those things. And the only way to do that is either by doing it in game, like you mentioned, or having a practice environment that's catered to, hey, sure, we're taking BP and you're able to get your swings in and feel out whatever you're working through. But we also got defense taking live reps. We've got base runners taking reps there. And then we got X, Y, and Z going off. We got bunt stations, like having these efficient practices that I think are a very big deal in the college game, but don't trickle into the youth side of things and actually having a coach walking around and helping and coaching through those scenarios to make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to me because every single head coach we've been able to visit with and talk baseball with have mentioned that, right? They've all said that they want guys who do the little things and know how to play, like every single one of them. And whether they spend a ton of time emphasizing it in recruiting, whether they spend a ton of time emphasizing when they get to campus, but you're now starting to see college coaches, and this is kind of when the light bulb went off for me, aside from watching a ton of college baseball and continuing to watch a ton of baseball and kind of noticing that some of these things are getting worse, even at like the AAA level, is we were down at Arkansas last fall and like talking about one of the preeminent player development programs in the country on both sides of the ball, like one of the best to do it, a team that, again, was once again in the College World Series. And what did they tell us about what they were working on so hard in the fall? Is like they saw that they could get an advantage over the teams that they had to compete against to win a national championship, which is their expectation and their goal every year, by focusing so much on base running, right? They talked about how they wanted their guys to be like, how are we going to generate more offense this year? We're going to steal more bases. We're going to run the bases better. And kudos to the coaches. There's several programs out there who have this has kind of been what they've done for years and years, and they never got off of it. because like you're now seeing programs like Arkansas who develop absolute mutants on the mound
Mm-hmm.
and recruit absolute mutants to come and hit for them in their ballpark, and they hit a ton of home runs. They spent their fall focused on base running, and they felt like they could get an advantage over the teams they compete with by being better base runners, being able to steal bases. And then on the flip side, because that's what they're working on against themselves in the fall, they're learning how to defend those things better.
Yeah, practice environments are probably the thing. And I can actually say the name of the coach that said this because he said it on our platform. But when Brian Torresani came back from the Dominican Republic, that was the one nugget that he made sure that stuck out to him was they practice a lot more than us. Like they practice, and that's all those guys do. They play catch. They spend more time. Like we are in an environment where it's play, 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 play. It's we're going to these tournaments. We're going to play 17 games in 5 days, and we're going to make sure everybody because tournaments are expensive. So it's understandable to make sure that and want to make sure that guys they get 12 games in, right? Because quite frankly, if you're traveling down to Lake Point, Georgia, and you're playing in a big tournament that you're spending 5,000 as a team to get into, you should get that many games in, quite frankly. So I understand it. But so much of our society in terms of baseball is play, 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 play. And again, I think it's something that was a reality check for me was probably high school for the first point, but college more was like, how much do we practice? Like we get to college and it's like you practice like it is 6 days a week including games, and you get one day off occasionally, and sometimes you do hitting groups and then you come back for practice. Like college is the first time of anybody's baseball career where it's like all you do is practice. And I know a lot of travel organizations and developmental organizations are going towards more practices, but it's one time a week where kids are kind of shaky on when they show up and they might have to work at Dairy Queen instead of coming. So they don't really show up. And some of them, because they're under 16, rely on mom and dad who also have full-time jobs because guess what? They got to pay for their kid to play youth sports now, right? The days of Little League and things like that being just a part of society are no longer there. And so they can't even get a ride to practice. So they're not even really getting the benefit that they're looking to get out of it. And I think that's such a fascinating part of it too, is sure, you're practicing as an organization, but how often are you practicing? And are you really able to bear down on, hey, today we're going to do, 25 minutes of base running and 25 minutes of NDD. And then, then we'll get our swings in, but we're getting it with live reps on the base pass and live reps defensively. If you're only practicing one day a week, you got to make sure that you're trying to cram 7 days of development into a 2 hour window.
Yeah, right. It's all right now. It's become test play, test play, test play. Right, where when you're taking batting practice, you're doing it with you're chasing a number, you're chasing certain things, or you're completely breaking down the engine and rebuilding swings and working on a mechanical thing, and then so you're testing, and then you're just playing, and then you play, and then you play, and then you play, and some of those things get lost, and that's how it becomes that 1v1 pitcher versus hitter showdown for a lot of it. You're not learning how to do the little things like we're talking about where you have a practice where you get 6 swings as an offensive player. That doesn't exist anymore. Every time someone makes it, I feel like nowadays, and this is mostly at the youth level and I'm talking, it's like practice is always going to consist of, well, we're going to get BP, just throw it in there. They're going to get a ton of swings today, and we'll figure out the rest. Maybe we'll do some of these other things. But like you said, it isn't like an individual defense and then a team defense. And then when you do get swings, it's incorporating a defensive segment in it or a base running segment into it. And, I, like you said, I think when you get to college, you get in that shock. But even sometimes at some college programs, we don't focus on the right things there either, where we're still not teaching the game the right way, and we are practicing a lot, but so much of it has been catered around the building the hitter, building the pitcher. We kind of forget the rest of the baseball player.
Well, and one of the coolest parts, because I was at one of those programs, I started at one of those programs playing college baseball, where all we did was play catch and take BP for an hour 15, and that was practice most of the time. And sometimes we would do 27 outs, right? Like that wasn't developmentally. And then I transitioned to Goldie Beacon, where we did base running every single day. It wasn't something we talked about. It was something we did and we practiced it and we did even the little things, right? And how much better you become as a base runner when you just do it every single day, right? Every single day. And it's just as simple things like leads and making sure we know how to do these and we have our progressions. that was such a culture shock to me. Is like, wow, this is serious, right? And then we'd split into Indy D, and infielders get to work with their position coach every day, right? Every single day, and it's structured and it's intentional, and what we're working on is intentional. And again, that's because college programs have the luxury of getting these guys for 6 out of the 7 days of the week, right? And then, okay, maybe we don't hit today, but at the very least, we're getting our work in and we're getting better. Or hey, hit on your own time, right? You want to play for us, you got to do this first, and then the offensive side of things is secondary. That takes your own intrinsic motivation and things like that. So, yeah, 100%. It's not every program, but I just think how we practice is probably the biggest obstacle of it's easy to just be like, hey, roll out the, hey, I'll throw, put me at 40 feet from the L screen. I'll fill it in, and let's feel good before we go compete this weekend and play a lot of baseball.
Yeah, and I just think that we chase so much of that. And like you said, it has to be a part of what we do. And at the youth level, again, I know it's hard because, like you said, you're paying. People are paying to be there and they're paying and expecting to get the amount of games in. And there's so many promises that are made up front. That's a whole nother topic to get into of like these promises that are made up front. And those people better fulfill those promises. So you do end up playing a ton. But it's like, are we then like at what point do we ask ourselves, are we doing right by them? And to me, that's why I love to burn down youth baseball and start over again and figure out a better way to do it because I do think there's a better way than how we are currently doing it. And that's just from the competition standpoint and what we're working on every day. But at some point, we have to take a step back and look at it and go, well, how do we build them as baseball players and not just as a hitter and a pitcher? And the rest is kind of just whatever we can fit in with the free time that we have, the extra time that we have once we're done doing those things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a very wide ranging question, right? And I think that's probably something that we'll definitely hit on over the course of doing these podcasts. But I think it was a really good conversation from the point of what are we identifying in our conversations and our experience as being the biggest obstacle to baseball development, right? In the couple boxes of we're not learning the game enough, right? We're not educating the game inside the game, situational hitting, right? I remember this will be the last story I tell as we want to wrap up around 40 minutes and keep these brief. My freshman year of college, I remember one of our assistant coaches sitting there and he goes, you guys don't even have an approach. One of our seniors, really good players, he goes, Coach, what is our approach? And deer in headlights, assistant coach, good guy, good decent baseball mind, but like that was how uneducated we were as a group. Like we're getting yelled at to have an approach, but nobody knew what their approach is, right? I had an individualized approach because I had watched and learned enough baseball, but that was what worked for me. The veteran who snapped back at the assistant coach, he had an approach because he was an All-American level player, and you can't be that good of a player if you don't. But we had 7 other guys in our lineup that were 50-50 on whether they went up there with a plan or not. And I think that's probably more reality of baseball today is more kids going up to the plate without a plan, without an objective, without an approach. And so many people know what approach is, but what is it, right? What is it truly for that individual? And it's up to the individual to learn that. It's up to the coaches to educate the players on what that should be. And it's up to the player then to be able to take that information into the batter's box or onto the mound, quite frankly, and then execute on that approach. But approach is such a buzzword in baseball. And I don't think kids really learn what approach is until they become high level college athletes. And maybe that's just me being oblivious to it. Maybe more high school athletes have approaches, but I feel like it's see ball, hit ball. Like I don't really understand pitcher tendencies. I don't understand what guys would throw. We have to educate, we have to learn, and then we have to take those learned skills into the game and then execute upon.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just said it best. And I think that part of what should be going on in youth baseball is like that is the time to test those approaches because if you get to high school even or college and you've never had an approach or have any clue what an approach is, it's going to take you a lot longer to develop one. But if you're learning as you're growing and even just the simple things like I'm going to sit first pitch fastball every at bat and
Every at
be
bat. Yep.
aggressive and swing at a ton of first pitches and maybe that
Mm-hmm.
works for you and then at least you have that building block so when you get up to the higher levels you know that hey I'm a good first ball hitter or maybe it's I'm a take a pitch guy just like things as simple as that figure out if it works for you. You're more comfortable after you've seen a pitch. Great. Go up there and take a first pitch every, spend a whole half of a season in youth baseball taking every single first pitch and, rotate it. This game, I'm going to swing at every first pitch. This game, I'm going to take every first pitch and figure out what works best for you. And then you can continue to refine them. And as you said, as you get more advanced and the coaching gets better and you get better as an athlete and a baseball player, then you can start to refine it. And like you said, then you can start to introduce things like pitcher tendencies, and approaches can be even at bat to at bat sometimes.
And be wrong. Like, don't be afraid to be
Yes.
wrong, right? Like,
The
sit
only way
first
to
pitch
figure out the
breaking
right
ball.
answer is
Yeah,
to be
it's
wrong.
be wrong. And like you said, test retest is what we should be doing. Of like, you have to digest what you did and what you did wrong and how to improve and things like that, instead of just like take a practice test. All right, yeah, go figure it out, right? No, we got to actually sit back, debrief, and kind of learn from what we had done. But like, my favorite thing that would fire me up when I'd be around younger baseball players is like a freshman comes in and you'd be like, takes a first pitch fastball or he's beat by it, right? And comes back to the dugout and go, hey man, what happened? He's, sitting first pitch breaking ball. I look him in the eyes and go, you're 5'7", 170 pounds, soaking wet. What are you sitting breaking ball for, right? Like, but while that is a funny thing to say, because anybody who's been around college baseball and worked with hitters knows that scenario of like, yeah, superstar, you're in college baseball now. That kid's got 87. He's not throwing you a breaking ball, right, in this situation. But the reality is I'd rather have that conversation than what was your plan? I don't know.
The shoulder
That's not
shrug.
going to work. Yeah, that's not going to work. So I think having those conversations with young baseball players about, okay, what was your approach? Okay, it was wrong, but here's why it's wrong. Did you know only this guy only throws breaking balls in this counts in this situation, and having the information to educate players, or just common sense. Hey, guys don't really throw breaking balls OL, right? At the youth level. They don't, right? So don't sit on it until you get 2 strikes and go from there. So really fun conversation, Dan. I think again we're just scratching the surface of the thoughts of what we believe in as baseball development and the important conversations we want to have. So this is going to be a really fun, enjoyable outlet. We're going to bring a ton of different people on. Will, who anybody who's been affiliated with our content for a while, he's going to be a part of it. We're going to get his perspective as a guy who's coached high school baseball, coached summer ball. We'll get some recruiting perspective. We'll get some sports psychology perspective, hitting perspective, pitching perspective. Everything. We want this to be as wide ranging of a baseball development conversation, but first and foremost, making sure we're just having these tough conversations that I feel like not enough people are having. A lot of people want to hear about how to make guys throw harder, how to make guys stronger, how to make guys hit the ball further. And that's great. That's great, because I'm as passionate about that as you are. I wouldn't want to go talk to these programs if I wasn't. But there is nuance to those conversations. It's deeper than that. We want to see the game of baseball be the best version of itself. And that comes from playing the game the right way, being able to throw strikes, being healthy, being available, right? The best ability is availability. Right now, arm injuries are through the roof. Why? Are we overtraining? Is there something we can control from that? So we want to explore all these different topics, and we hope this is the beginning of something that's uniquely special and something that we're kind of changing the narrative and conversation around baseball development to have a holistic perspective of it. So with that said, make sure you smash the subscribe button, share with 5 friends. If you think this is a video that or a podcast that will help somebody else, make sure you send it their way. And that'll do for this episode of the Baseball Development Hub.